Welcome to Ironcast. We are currently trending with the over 60s audience, so why not tell a grandpapa or grandmama about us? Put them in front of the YouTube and then raid their cupboards for biscuits and pound coins. Let's introduce the commanders. They've trained under Mr. Kipling themselves, and as it turns out, they don't just make exceedingly good cakes. They play a mean game of Company of Heroes 2. Leading the British is Jay, and they've got sappers out the door. They're going to be greeted by Fellowship Pioneers in the middle of the map. But let's introduce the opposing commander. And on this opposite side of the small world that we know as Toronto coastline, with a small plane crossing it, like a bat out of hell, they'll be gone when the morning comes. But they never were gone. They were always in our hearts, festering like an abomination. It's Ray commanding the Wehrmacht. Quick news announcements before those first bullets are traded. A little bit of a real talk, not sure how to bring this up. Does anyone like model tanks? My wife does, and she's getting into painting them. She did this 40k truck in a winter camo for me, and this is one she's working on. It's an M18 Hellcat, which is a trans ally capable of firing 20 rounds of high explosive validation a minute. Now, my wife's disabled. She suffers from trauma and nerve damage. Work in the open world isn't possible, so instead she helps with these videos, and she wondered if anyone might be interested in buying model tanks through Ironcast, fully painted from big to small. If you are interested, let us know in the discord.me/Ironcast or here in the video comments. I do find this very awkward to bring up, but it would really mean a lot and help a lot. And the really cool thing is to be able to show all the models here on the channel too before we ship them away. So on with Company of Heroes 3 as the engagements start. Sappers are out in force for Jay, forcing the Fellowship Pioneers to take cover inside of the building. Only 2 windows on this side though, so the sappers will win this engagement, firing through those walls. Ray's holding out for a machine gun till the end of the night, and they've got to be strong and they've got to be Reich und Emma's Frusch vom Kampf sein. Not a soul was lost inside that building. Well played from Ray. Now, you might have seen a lot of sappers hit the field for the British. There's still this systemic problem of favoring engineer-type units, although maybe that's kind of inaccurate as a global statement. It's more like players want to avoid mainline infantry units where possible early on. The Wehrmacht are starting to get MP40 Grenadiers against the US since the Fellowship Pioneers were nerfed, but the Wehrmacht versus British matchup we see here, you don't have to worry about that early quad half-track strategy from the US. There's more flexibility, so we're seeing Fellowship Pioneers as an option. The British, however, like sappers, they are much cheaper, and as long as you get close to the target, those sappers will win those engagements easily. The more squads you have on the field early on, the more map presence you have, and a tier 2 comes out very quickly, regardless of how the fight goes as well. You bring out a vehicle like a Humber, maybe a Stewart if you've done particularly well, and then you've got a bunch of sappers that can repair those vehicles. So the British can delay getting out infantry sections in favor of getting more sappers to begin with. Fellowship Pioneers dropping at the back, trying to decamp the fuel. Ray is very dependent on moving this machine gun around to assist their Fellowship Pioneers. The micro is looking good for Ray, keeping the sappers away. Sappers get into the building and exit out of the back. Oh, I love the subtle happenings like that. Now, I mentioned that the Fellowship Pioneers have been nerfed. They weren't nerfed directly. They just can't build a flak without getting tier 2 first. They're still excellent foot soldiers, and they will win in a long-range fight. Jay's starting to gift the flamethrowers, a weapon designed by Mr. Kipling themselves. They'll turn anything into a Jerry Bakewell in 10 seconds flat. I was skeptical at first, but once you pick off the charred flesh and bones, you're left with something that quite simply is delicious. Got quite a few places Ray is retreating from here. Their machine gun is on the south side, manages to suppress a sapper squad. Nowhere for them to hide. Just somewhere for them to crawl. Now, this map, this Taranto of a map, doesn't have a strong cutoff. You'd need to take 2 territories in order to do so, one of them being this strategic point here that Jay's sappers are on. They get the decap, and then they need the fuel point just to the west to neatly isolate Ray, and that's where they're heading now. 3 Fallscher Pioneers on the field. They are ready with the Luftwaffe company. Jaegers will be out the door and hope to restore order soon. Sapper squad just tanking those bullets. Flanking squad. Are they going to get behind? I believe they are, just in time. Meanwhile, the fuel point got decapped, so there's some territories cut off from supply. More sappers in the north, and with all the buildings and line of sight blockers, it's incredibly easy to get those sappers up close. Unlike a map like Road to Tunis, which is extensively open. Very little control here for Ray. Maybe we can get those Fallscher Pioneers moving and see what the Jaegers can do. Only need 1 squad to capture, remember? Although, sometimes, in this situation, it would have been better to idle and wait for that backup before moving. So, you know, my bad. Actually, this is one of my very own weak points. It's the impatience, the tendency to always want to be doing something to the point where, rather than executing a tactical maneuver that's just perfectly timed and primed, you move a squad into range, you get into the heavy cover. Right at the moment, you could get a flank with another squad. What happens is you engage way too early, though, and the second squad doesn't get into position. Then the first squad gets defeated, has to retreat. The second squad then arrives, is no longer flanking. You don't have the numerical advantage. It takes 2 to flanko, and you gotta time that correctly. Sandbag Wars on the victory point. Big push out now for Ray. But the sappers are just gonna hold quite comfortably behind those sandbags. Machine gun still does good damage, though. Jay more focused on this area. The sappers getting a little bit closer. Ah, well worth the risk. Down a Fallscher Pioneer squad, but a new Jaeger squad presents itself neatly on the field. So far, Jay hasn't really been looking for battles. They've just been trying to wander around, conquer as much of the map as possible. But I think now the strategy and tactics is going to have to change. They're going to have to confront Ray. 3rd Jaeger squad on its way. Loving the amount of infantry. But are we going to see the necessity of the Panzerschreck spam that we hear so much about on Reddit? Usually not. What we see is that is more of an occurrence in team-based games. But in 1v1s, sometimes it isn't that necessity for all the Panzerschrecks on the field. Ray is starting to push back and regain control of territory. What they need more than anything is the victory points. Triple cap in effect at the moment for the British. We can give a big shout out to the sandbags on that bottom victory point for allowing to cap under heavy machine gun fire. But the map's now looking a bit more divided in half. I think it's going to be interesting to see what Jay brings to the field, because sappers ain't gonna cut it anymore. Mainline infantry being delayed is quite often okay in the current meta of things, but it does mean that your troops aren't gaining veterancy where they kind of need it. And British infantry, I mean, their advantage is they're kind of just an all-round solid infantry bunch. They'll always be working hard for you during the whole game. But I do tend to find that veterancy is almost required on them. You can see these sappers are just being pushed back. The sandbags, again, the true hero of the story, allowing them to capture the victory point for a bit longer and hold out. We've not seen a light vehicle out, which means the J is likely going for, I would hazard a guess, a Crusader. They are building something tanky. I don't think Ray has to fear too much. Ooh, Sapper Squad, I think, trying to do a flank there, but it's the machine gun that they probably want to be flanking, but it's the machine gun that was actually protecting the flank. All these Jaegers on the field. First Panzerschreck is out as well, so nothing to fear, nothing to worry about. Ray is conquering the north side of the map. We've got two flamethrower sappers heading up here. Are you ready to feel the burn, Fellowship Pioneers? Probably not. Jaeger Squad will help them out. It's good they're standing in the middle of the road just in case the Sapper Squad does decide to attack. Being in no cover typically means your squad members will be spread out, and it's really the spacing between the squad members which is important for reducing the damage. Crusader 3 out here, as expected. Interesting that it's heading to top side though, and a lot of the dangers is down here. I guess they just want to avoid the Panzerschreck, Wirbelwind, Flakpanzer on the field as well, heading up there. Wondering how many more Jaeger squads are going to be converted to having a Panzerschreck on them. Of course, the Wirbelwind won't do too much to the Crusader 3, but second Panzerschreck upgraded. Get these Jaeger squads up there. The Flak Panzer will handle the infantry. Jaeger squads will handle the Crusader. Should be no trouble at all. This is looking pretty strong for Ray now. Jay brought out the Crusader 3 hoping to have some kind of asset advantage against all the infantry on the field, but the Crusader's the only thing that can deal with the Flak Panzer, but it's also got to contend with all the infantry as well. 3 Panzerschrecks now. And they are blobbing up. Damn you! Is it all doom and gloom, though? Well, no, the British have treated themselves to a machine gun. It's just a matter of being able to get that in a solid enough position that it won't be stricken down by the Flak Panzer. There we go. So the Wirbelwind wants to take care of the machine gun. The machine gun is being protected by the Crusader, and the Crusader is getting shot at, potentially, by the Panzerschrecks. Just inching out of range, and the weak chain in this link for the British Army is that lack of infantry. So the sappers with the flamethrowers would have been very helpful there. They were too busy stuck in base, recuperating. I think this is a good example of an early game start. Yes, getting a lot of sappers is great, but you can't just not get infantry for the British. That mainline infantry does still serve a pretty good function, as well as all the utility that you get from a recon package. You can't not have anti-infantry power, and you can't just rely on that first tank to deal with all of the infantry that the Wehrmacht are going to inevitably bring. Because the Wehrmacht don't have a tremendous lot of options, or at least not safe options, in the early to mid-game. Crusader go for the base. Oh, one more shot of the machine gun. I think they're going to get it. But it can't just be recruit. Oh, gonna try and actually destroy the machine gun. They really hate that thing. Gotta be careful that no Panzerschrecks are popping up behind you. Second Crusader hits the field. Gotta be trying to stack them up, I suppose. Jaegers moving together. You can see the spread of forces across the beautiful tactical map, which I apparently learned not enough people use. You can get all the information from the minimap. Well, no, you can't. You can't actually see if, or rather, what squads are where on what health. Like, you can look in the top right or in the bottom if it's where your unit icons are positioned, and you can see the health of those units. But you don't necessarily see where they are on the minimap unless you click on them. So the tactical map in that regard is quite useful. Ooh, Jaeger's slipping around the machine gun. What are you doing? Why are you running in front? Of course your leg! What a red stuff for ein Maschinengewehr! Freaking flip nuts! Have you been involved in an accident at work that was entirely your fault? Then subscribe now! Whilst you're at home recovering from terrible idiotness, you can watch more on the Ironcast YouTube. And are your territories under enemy control? Why not give a fuck and do something about it? The British are getting pushed back, and I'm terrified that more tea may get dumped into the ocean. Although world's biggest tea, if the oceans were tea, that'd be an improvement. Just add sugar. Jaeger squads with their Panzerschrecks. Moving towards the south, Crusader. As one in the north goes and picks off the whirlwind. All the Jaegers are they just can't decide. Do we go north? Do we go south? Do we lose our whirlwind flak panzer? We sure as hell do. And then the sappers are pushing through the middle with their flamethrowers. Poor Ray doesn't know what to do. Jay with a brief moment of tactical geniusness. Don't lose your Crusader. Ooh. That's what we call a multi-pronged attack. Now, the Jaegers could have divided. And this is a very valuable bit of information, assessment on the opposing commander. If you're playing as the British, it's very important to know if your opponent can split their forces and handle multiple engagements. And what kind of engagements? Not all engagements are the same. Not if you have two engagements going off, but it's just like one infantry squad against another on both sides. That's a lot more different than having two engagements that are much bigger in their scope of things. Having said that, though, both commanders seem relatively well equipped for their micromanagement across multiple battles. That, I think, was a sense of unfamiliarity. I butchered that word for Ray. I don't think they're used to splitting up their anti-tank infantry. And being very daring with these Crusaders. Now, my analysis of Panzerschreck blobs, they're very aggressive in nature. When people Panzerschreck blob, they will be looking to move that entire force and just take whatever they think that they're entitled to. The greedy buggers. Nice flamethrowering, but the French pioneers exit the building with their speed boost on.
Sector now under enemy control.
But yeah, like anti-tank infantry with Panzerschrecks or rockets,
The enemy has 300
they
points
are
remaining.
much better as a deterrent. It's best if the tanks come to you, in which is case, I mean, Jay's tanks have been going straight to the Wehrmacht base. There's not really much more coming to you that one could do. But the Panzerschrecks just weren't in a place to take them out. And you know what? I have to question that. I know, the media doesn't want to criticize the government, but we've been told that we have epic anti-tank capabilities, and then there's tanks in our base, and the news isn't reporting on it. It's starting to sound a bit like Russia, isn't it? Although if this were Russia, they'd probably be telling this to attack that.
Territory lost.
It's been abandoned, it's gone, it's not... We can't say that's part of our military forces anymore. Get well soon, Ukraine. And a shout out to Ukraine, by the way. They were my favorite faction to play in Command & Conquer Red Alert. British forces seem to be getting pushed back here. Well, they've got all kinds of tanks going to Ukraine now from the British tea-making Challenger tanks. They literally do come equipped with a Pocket World Starbucks.
Infantry firing on us!
And I bet the Ukrainians that get the Leopard and the Abrams tank are going to be very jealous of the tea crew that get to play in the Challenger tanks, sipping their tea like royalty. Oh, royalty. There's a pun in there. Panzer IV needs to decide where it wants to be. By the way, I don't like Britain much, but I can at least now pretend that my personal tax contributions paid for that tea-making facility in one of the Challenger tanks that is helping Ukrainians out. It makes me feel somewhat proud. Jay's gonna have to figure out how to respond to these 4 Panzerschrecks. 3 machine guns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sapper squads. I think we might see a Churchill Black Prince as the end goal game. Double machine guns sat side by side. Crusader 3s. Get the backhoe grenades away. Ooh, that's more than just a regular grenade. Here comes the big push for the Axis.
He's hit! Commander.
Also,
we
just
have
a...
command points
What the
that still
frick?
require assignment.
Get out of there! Try to clog the tracks up. It just ain't gonna work. There's no track damage in this game.
Don't stop firing.
Ooh, more grenades are out. Just a little one this time. The Axis getting pretty close to being just outside of the base.
Victory point is under enemy control.
Gonna need to get some faster repairs initiated from all these sapper squads. All these sappers and the tanks are seemingly on low health a lot of the time. Oh, reminds me, Portugal was actually offering refugee status for the Ukrainians. I think right at the start of the big announcement, the event.
The enemy has 200 points
And I actually looked into doing this myself. I think like 8,000 people signed up to help refugees. It was really warming to see. I'm interested to see what kind of place Ukraine will be in the future. When it's rebuilt by the Russian assets that have been seized, which is now in the super billions. If you've seen those places like Egypt, where you have the glamorous marble and gold buildings, and then there's this sharp cutoff where it's just slums to the horizon, I think Ukraine might be kind of like that. Ukraine will be the marble and gold building, and then by comparison, the rest of the world will just look like a slum. Yeah, anyway, we're getting sidetracked. Just a reminder, though, you can't tell me not to talk politics in a World War II game. I specifically chose this political game, so I could talk about it and whatever I like. So, huzzah. Getting a 3 cap returned to the hands of the Axis forces.
Enemy forces have claimed our territory.
Still got all our Jaeger squads alive and kicking. 2nd Panzer IV on the way. The dangers just keep mounting up for the British. And I still want to say that it is the neglecting of getting mainline infantry which is really causing the problems. The sapper squads just aren't staying alive for long enough. And it's not just like the here and now, it's the events leading up to this. Rushing out that Crusader was a hell of a gamble. But getting all these Jaeger squads out was never truly a gamble, because they didn't have to get the Panzerschrecks out. They could have went the G43 rifles instead. Literally, it was just reacting to what they're seeing. And rather than seeing all the Jaeger on the field, Vet 3! Congratulations! And saying, hey, okay, all these Jaeger squads, now I've got an infantry section. Yeah, maybe we can get some recon rifles. Try and find some good heavy cover to pitch ourselves behind. And take on some of these Jaegers. And you might say to yourself that Jaeger squads, especially with the G43 rifles, do beat the British infantry sections. Well, you're forgetting all of the utility. A recon packaged infantry section. You've got the flares in there. The rifle grenades are a super good tool. Just throwing infantry into the meat grinder to try and, I'm not even sure, we're never going to decap that. I think this is the equivalence of a surrender. Damn, the Black Prince now arrives. If only that infantry had stayed alive. We could have tried sending them to the top victory point, a much safer one, rather than the middle one, which the Axis have supremely fortified.
We've only 50 points left.
But there's just not enough stuff. I mean, we're going to see what the Black Prince does anyway. Maybe it pulls out some kind of tea-making miracle. Getting shot in the side. How many shots does it take a Panzerschreck to kill a Churchill? I want to say 8. Was that 4? I'm going to say 4, 5. So probably
The enemy
10.
has only 25 points left.
That seems to make sense. It's like 5 to kill a Sherman, 8 if it's got the improvised arm upgrade.
Panzer 4 reporting in.
Anywho, I think we can safely say that victory goes to Ray. Congratulations on your big infantry payout. Like seeing a lot of infantry on the field. Some people might say, well, that was a bit Panzerschreck blobby, which, yes, it was, but that was the correct move to make. Now, if Jay had got some infantry sections out beforehand, we might not have seen all those Panzerschrecks out. But I could be wrong. Until next time, my name will still remain as Anuki. See you then.